What's up, bogey man?
Not a lot, Dan Antonio. What you up to?
Uh, just hanging around. Do what we got done doing some yard work a while ago. Some much needed yard work. Now that it finally feels like springtime.
Dude, I feel that, man.
How's your week?
It's pretty good. I joined a bourbon society down in Frankfurt, which is about 30 miles from my house. So I joined that a few months back, and I went to one of the meetings this week. This Monday, like the third Monday of every month, they have a meeting, and so I went to that this week, and it was pretty fun. Robert actually joined the bourbon society too, so he went with me, and so it was a lot of fun. It was I've done a blind tasting there with them before, but I hadn't been to like one of the regular meetings, and so we did that, and it was pretty fun.
Oh, cool.
Um,
So,
but
what does that entail? What do you do?
do what?
What do you do?
Well, it's they do a lot of stuff actually. Like one of the just kind of month to month things that they do is they just meet up. Like I said, once like the third Monday of every month, they'll meet up and just kind of talk about bourbons. Everybody like last Monday. So Monday was rye night. So if you wanted to, you could bring a bottle of rye, and so there was probably 30 bottles on the table there, and you just got to sample them and taste them, and talk about it and ask whoever brought it, talk about where they got it from, or just I mean it's kind of just a free form kind of night, but it was a lot of fun.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And but they have a lot of stuff, like they have a lot of like scheduled events, like where they'll have distillers from certain distilleries come in and talk to them, and like talk and bring samples, and here's kind of what we're doing lately and that kind of thing. So and they go on barrel picks, and so it's a lot of fun stuff.
That sounds romantic.
It is very romantic.
Well, you want to build our bar?
Let's do it.
So now that we are somewhat getting back into, or not somewhat, we are getting back into our bottle escapades.
Hmm. I like that word.
Tonight, you're going to kick this off with what you brought, kind of
Mhm.
get back into our reviews, I guess I should say, and
Yeah.
our historical fragments. You like how like I'm kind of picking words that like it makes me sound like I'm just
Yeah.
out there.
And those of us that know you know that you don't know what those words mean.
I don't know fragments and things like that. This got to mean it's like a library, right?
Yeah, that's what it
Yeah.
means.
Okay. We'll go with that.
Cool.
So first things first, since you're starting this shindig off, um, what did you bring?
So, what I'm bringing to the table tonight is a second product from a distillery that we've already added a product to the bar from, but it's a different product altogether. I mean, it's not a bourbon, but what I'm bringing to the table is from Woodford Reserve. It's the Woodford Reserve Kentucky straight malt whiskey.
Ooh.
Um, and so I'm bringing it to the table because I think it's a different product, but I think it complements what we already have on the bar. And I know we've added a couple of like scotches and whatnot, but this is different because it is a malt whiskey instead of a bourbon, and we'll talk about that later. But it does this particular product kind of ties it all together, so that's why I brought that tonight.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
have a pour ready to cheers.
So I will cheers to that. All right. So you told me what you were bringing to the table,
Mm-hmm.
and you say you talked about why you're bringing it to the table.
Yep.
So one of the things that I want to ask you, and I know that this bar, as you mentioned earlier, is not just about bourbon. I mean, it can be about many different things. But you said something. You said this complements of
Yeah.
what we have on the bar already. So tell me a little bit about how does this complement what we've got already?
Well, so I was over our little bottle hiatus there. See what I did there? Uh, I,
Ah, you talk about people's back ends.
yep,
Okay.
yep, yep. During our bottle hiatus and doing other things, I got to thinking and I went back and looked and I kind of, we do have things that are on the bar that aren't bourbon. Like we have a mellow corn, we have two scotches, and there's something I want to talk to you about, but I'll talk to you about it next week during our little pre-small talk. There's something I came across today that I think is kind of funny. But anyway, so we have a few things that aren't bourbon, but I wanted to bring kind of a single malt. And when I was in Colorado last June filming for this Colorado whiskey film that me and my buddy Steve are doing, I noticed kind of out there they are. I mean, they like bourbon and stuff, but they're super proud of their like American single malts. Like they're into single malts and they're that's kind of what they. I don't know if they want their claim to fame to be that, but they're certainly really proud of their single malts. And so I thought, well, why not add a single malt to the bar? It's about time. This is like 15 or 16 episodes in. But I specifically chose this one because this one is a little bit different, a different straight malt than what you're going to find out there. Because we'll talk about the mash bill in a little bit, but the mash bill that this particular product provides lets this drink more like a bourbon than anything else, but it is considered a straight malt whiskey. So that's kind of how it complements what's on the bar. And we'll get into the specifics in a little bit, but that's why I brought it because it is a different product, but it complements bourbons very well.
Okay, I can see that. I'm interested to know, hearing a little bit of exactly what that entails. So in season one, we would talk about like the label meaning,
Hmm.
it's like the history behind it and the distillery and things like that. But I want to talk a little bit about like who distilled it, who aged it, kind of like behind the scenes aspect of this label here.
Yeah. And so I think it's kind of important moving forward since, when we took our little break and we had a few folks ask us, you had a friend or two, and I did too, have some friends ask us, like, how do you read a label and how do you know if a distillery makes it? I thought instead of us talking about the label in terms of like the graphics or, what it stands for, that we would talk about the label as far as kind of what it means. So, we talked about reading the label. They'll tell you where it's distilled and if it is, in fact, a product that the distillery distills or if it's something that they source. And so, I think we kind of owe it to the two listeners that we have that we kind of cover that. Um, so yeah, this is actually a product that's produced, distilled, everything by Woodford Reserve. And it is part of their flagship product line, which is called Distillers Select. And we'll talk a little bit. I know we'll talk about if it has any other expressions a little bit later, but yeah, so it is part of that. It is distilled by Woodford Reserve. It's aged, distilled, bottled, and it's 90. Hang on, remember these bad boys?
Oh, golly, bringing out the big guns.
It's 90.4 proof. And so it is, it's a little stouter than like your average 80 proof flagship products. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure all of their distiller selects are 90 proof. So I think that's pretty standard for them.
Okay, all right. Um, well, let's talk a little bit about what's in the bottle. I know that we've done this in the past, and this is going to be a little bit different. But let's talk about what's in the bottle as far as mash bill, aging technique. this one's going to be a little bit different, I think, to our listeners. But I want to talk a little bit about distilling types. What is special about the product in itself?
So distilling types, I don't think there's really that much that's kind of special about it. But what I talked earlier about, this is a malt whiskey that is going to complement bourbons more so than any other malt out there. And if you and I, we do, even though I will claim that I like bourbons better than anything else, I do like scotches and I do like single malts. I like that kind of thing. And you get a specific flavor profile, or at least I do, off of malts. I mean, it's because it's just straight barley, most of it. It's a little earthier and it's a little, you get those profiles off of it. But what Woodford does differently on this mash bill is they use the bare minimum malted barley. So it's 51% malted barley, 47% corn, 2% rye. So if you think about it, this mimics a bourbon more than anything else. I mean, bourbon has to be 51% corn, but it's 47% corn, 51% malt. So it's almost, I mean, it's like you took bourbon and just flipped it just a little bit, just enough to call it a malt whiskey. So I do think that because of that change that they did to it, it gives it more of a bourbon-esque feel to it. So even though it's a malt whiskey, it's gonna drink right up there with your bourbons, and so it's gonna have that same kind of sweetness and complexity that a bourbon will have. So that's why um, that's why I added this to the bar, because if you pick any other, I would say 90% of the single malts out there are going to be 100% malted. And Woodford has put out 100% malted products before. In 2013, they put out two of their Masters collections varieties were 100% malted barley. And in 2016, one of their distillery series products was 100%. So they're not a stranger to it. But for this product, which is a flagship distiller select product, then it is the bare minimum of malted barley to consider it a straight malt or malted whiskey. And so it drinks more like a bourbon.
So I got a question that's it's not one of our you
Mm-hmm.
know questions that we have, but you said that, or I'm reading on here that it's 2% rye.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that is always I'm a bourbon guy as well, but one of the things that I've never now also because I do utilize tobacco products, my taste is probably off from other people's. But does 2% rye really make a big difference?
Honestly, that would be a question we could ask, somebody like Royce or Allen or somebody. I'm not sure that the 2% rye would make that big of a difference, but I mean, maybe. I mean, it's there for a reason. So
Probably just like a
I've
void type
never,
of thing,
I've
complexity.
never done anything. I mean, when you think about like a high rye bourbon, it's 18% rye or 20% rye or something like that, and
Yeah.
I've drank bourbons that are 5% rye or 7% rye, so or 7% malted barley, whatever. So I mean, there are those small percentages, but I don't know why necessarily 2% would make it make any
I
difference.
just saw that and it interested me. Like
Hmm.
it has to be, and like you said, for a reason. But I'm curious as to why.
Yeah, I would like to know that myself.
So what about the product line? Are there any other expressions of this product, or is this a standalone?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, if you would listen, um, we have
Huh?
this is part of the distiller select. So if you think Woodford, they're the any if you buy just traditional Woodford Reserve bourbon, or they have a Woodford Reserve straight bourbon, a Woodford Reserve weeded whiskey, a Woodford Reserve rye whiskey, and a Woodford Reserve Kentucky straight malt whiskey. And those are all the Distiller Select product line. They're all kind of the base level products that Woodford has. So it is part of that line. And then kind of a step up, and I can't remember what exact product line it is, but like the double oaked is I think it's like, I can't remember what product it is, but I'll put it down below for sure. But I can't remember. But it's like a kind of a step up. And then of course they have, like the masters. I mean, they have different levels of, product. Like they're different levels of quality product, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
You know what, man? I've never like I've always been a Woodford Reserve fan, but I never knew that they had a single malt. And so, quick story is whenever I was deployed, we were allowed to get 3 drinks within an 18-hour period, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could have these 3 drinks. Well, they for the longest time they carried Woodford Reserve, and then they kind of quit for a while, and I think it was just because of the availability.
Right.
But anyway, I remember going over there, and I would always get a pour of Woodford Reserve. Like on my Saturday when I'd go and have my drinks, I'd always get a pour of Woodford Reserve. And I was thinking to myself, like how smooth just the flagship is. You know what I mean? Just how smooth and complex it is. And I would drink it and whatever. Well, my father-in-law is he's not a big drinker to begin with, but for Christmas, his son got him a whiskey set. Just like every gentleman needs a whiskey set with all these things. And one of the things that the whiskey set came with was Woodford Reserve. And so he comes over to my house one day and he's like, tell me about this. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, there's something about this. And I was like, good or bad? He's like, this is the best bourbon I've ever had. And he loves it tremendously. And so I remember kind of walking in, like how it's made and all that stuff. And so interestingly enough, you're talking about this single malt product. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I had no idea. Because, and to be fair here, I do lean more towards like a single malt probably because I love that specific flavor that it gives.
Right.
And so I am thoroughly excited about this product, which is going to lead me into the next question. But I do have to say,
I was going to say, before you go into the next question, I was going to say, I just looked it up. The double oaked is a barrel finish select product. And then what they have is, this is a distiller select product. They have a master's collection, which is the step up. And then they have a distiller series, which is distillery only. A distillery series is distillery only. So it's kind of like our buddies down at Limestone Branch, that they have that distillery program where they do their different recipes, and you can go.
Oh yeah.
So you can go there and get, for fairly cheap, some kind of off the wall recipe or something that's super good. It's their experimental series is what I was trying to say. But the distillery series is kind of the same. And like, I know the other day I was online looking through and they had released their double oaked as a the distillery release series, distillery series release only. So
AKA the other day.
A lot of their experimental stuff comes through that distillery series.
Now, when you say double oak, wouldn't that be quadruple oak?
Well, they have the double oak, and then they have a double oak, so it's twice aged in a single barrel. I mean,
so it's like a triple double in basketball.
Yeah, just like a triple double.
Get me on the court and I'm troubled. Last week messed around and got a triple double.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was thinking. AKA the other day.
Okay.
Well, there's all these things that you like. There's all these different bourbons that you do, and you're like, this, it's this, and I'm like, all right, sweet. And then I go to all my places, and it's like, I can't find it. Like as an example, the benchmark foolproof, can't find it. So that leads me to the next question, because you bring these wonderful products to the table.
Well, here,
How hard is this product to find?
so I always say, because like where maybe you just need to go to different liquor stores, because like like where I go, the place like I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, at least 1 week a month, and there's a couple of stores there that I go to, and they pretty much have what we talk about, and they have this. I used to get this all the time in Knoxville, and I want to tell a quick story before I get into the logistics of this. What's special to me about this bottle, this product is, before I was into bourbon at all, I wasn't, before I even met my buddy Steve, I wasn't doing any filming in the bourbon industry. I didn't know anybody in the bourbon industry. At the time, I was just filming moonshiners and, doing the moonshine thing. But Heather and I took a trip up here to, we stayed in Frankfurt, and I knew nothing about anything. But what I did know is we had tickets to go to Buffalo Trace Distillery. So we were going to go do a Buffalo Trace tour. We came up here for the weekend. On that Saturday, we're going to do a Buffalo Trace. And while we were here, somebody said, you need to go to Woodford Reserve. And because it's two different distilleries. If you've never been to either one of them, Buffalo Trace is like this commercial type, like industrial plant. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, it's this plant, that produces whiskey, and you just get to see it in that realm. We went there when you were here last time.
Right.
But Woodford Reserve is right down the road, and it's this beautiful landscaped, like architecturally, just, I mean, it looks like a golf resort or something. I mean, it looks like, looks like there's a golf course behind. I mean, it's just that beautiful landscape. So it's just night and day different. So we went over to Woodford Reserve the next day, and this was before COVID and before everybody started. Now you have to like call days in advance to get tickets for tours and stuff. But we walked in on that Sunday and took a tour. But it just so happened, this is the longest story just to make this point. We were there. When we were there, they had just released this product, or they hadn't even released it to the public yet. You could only get it at the distillery. But what was cool about it is at the end of the tour, you do a tasting, and one of the offerings they had was this. So they had this, and we were just in the beginning of this. Like I said, you can only get it at the distillery at the time. And we got to write notes down. So they ask us, like, what are you tasting? What are some tasting notes? Is it hot? Is it, is it a long finish? They ask all these questions. So it was almost like they were doing some research. So I don't know how many people, I don't know if it was just that week or that month, or they had been doing it for a year. I have no idea how many people came through and they asked all these questions, and they collected all that data for their tasting notes and whatever. So it was kind of cool that Heather and I got to taste this and write down things like, I'm tasting this or this, and of course I was new to bourbon, so I didn't have that many, intricate tasting notes, but I mean, I just knew it was good. I mean, I knew it was, pretty smooth. And I just thought it was cool that we got to be a part of that initial kind of, I don't know what market, a test market or whatever. So I thought it was kind of cool.
Well, okay. So I'm assuming probably what they do with that is they gather up information and then they tweak it, probably tweak the blending process to get it to. Does that taste different than what it did when you and Heather went up there?
I don't remember it tasting any different, but probably what they do is take all of the notes, and if the majority of it say, it tastes like this or that, then they know that they're onto something. Because if one person tastes it and says, "Oh, I taste chocolate," or vanilla or whatever, that's one thing. But if 100 people or 1,000 people say that, then it's like, okay, these are some legitimate factual notes that you should get out of this. So, I mean, that might be what they were doing with it, but I just thought that was kind of cool. But so to answer your question, how available is it? What the cost is? This was, so the Booze app puts this at the $36 MSRP, a fair price of $40, but I paid $34 for it. So the liquor store that I go to around the house here always is a couple bucks cheaper than where I can get it anywhere else, and it was like $34. So I'm not complaining.
All
And
right.
yes, you should be able to get it. I mean, if you can get Woodford Reserve at your place, you should be able to get this.
Okay.
And if not, go
Uh,
to another liquor store.
I can probably end up doing that. One of the things I was going to say about your story, if I was a distillery that was doing this and I had put out these tasting notes to the public, once I collected all of them, I would probably just throw them away and be like, "These guys are dumb. They don't know what they're talking about." Just as like a joke, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's
Because
what
I
I would
think
do.
I put it tastes like banana licorice.
but and so they were playing like this dude is spot on.
I'm just kidding, and it does not taste like banana licorice.
Okay, well then walk me through the tasting process. See how
Okay.
it leads into things.
Yeah, that's what we call a lead in the
Oh
business.
man, I think it's pronounced leading.
Oh yeah, sorry, my bad. So yeah, on this, what I get on the nose, I mean it's a really sweet, but it does have some earthiness to it. And I mean, when you think of like a Scotch, even not the peaty Scotches like that you and I like, but when you think about just a traditional Scotch or like a Irish whiskey or whatever, it's got kind of a little earthiness to it. So to me, it's got that, but it's sweeter than that. It's when I a lot of bourbons when I smell them, it's sweet smelling. So it's probably the 47% corn, but it's got a sweet earthy flavor nose to it. And then when I taste it, mm, on that front palate, it's almost like a sweet bread. Um, I know when you and I used to drink just straight moonshine and do the moonshine thing, the thing that moonshiners like strive for is the tasting note of like liquid cornbread. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Remember we used to talk about that? It's not like quite cornbread or anything, but it's like a sweet bready, like the breadiness is sweet, but it's not overly sweet like a cake or anything like that. But mid palate to back palate, it really to me comes in with this dark chocolate or cocoa kind of flavor. And the finish to me is pretty long, and it lingers on with that cocoa finish. So it's that baking, it goes quickly from a earthy, bready type to then the sweetness kicks in. And I think that's where that's where it kind of drinks like a bourbon, that sweetness comes in. And then to me it finishes off with like a cocoa or a dark, how dark chocolate not real as flavorful as milk chocolate, but it's you get the hint of that chocolate in there. So to me that's kind of what it finishes out. It's like this rich dark chocolate finish on it.
Dude, it sounds like whenever you describe that, have you ever been into a bakery that makes like chocolate bread?
Oh yeah.
It's like what you're describing probably tastes like what that smells like.
Mm-hmm.
That is almost a sweet yeasty chocolate. I mean, I know what yeasty is not probably the best word, but you know what I'm talking about.
It
The
tastes yeasty.
It's like got this like yeast infection type. I would love to try that.
Yeah, dude. Well, as I tell you every time, if you can make it to my house at least once ever, then you could be drinking all this stuff with me.
Yeah, and eventually I will. Eventually I will.
I know you will. I know, buddy.
You know, buddy.
I know, sweet boy.
I know. Well,
Well, that's it, man. That's the Distiller Select Woodford Reserve Kentucky Straight Malt Whiskey. And as we learned a couple weeks ago, the straight means it's been aged for at least 2 years. Kentucky Straight means it was distilled, aged, all that in Kentucky. So I mean that right there, I probably should have said that when we talked about the label, but I mean those hints right there kind of tell you what all you need to know. about the product, and I think though, I mean, it's good, and even though it's 100% different from most like single malts that you can get on the market, it drinks more like a bourbon. It's sweeter like a bourbon, but it's got a little bit more complexity, I think, than most single malts. But I think put right up there with our bourbons, I think it'll be a good
Very,
addition.
very well.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, I will have another toast to that, my brother.
Yes, sir. Well, homie, until next week, there you have it.
I love having it.
I love having it too. Having it's my favorite thing.
It's one of my favorite things as well.
Yeah. Let's
Next
just don't
week.
have it together. Let's have it separately.
What if you have it together? Then it just becomes weird.
It's weird. Like people start talking about you. It's weird.
And I don't like that either.
We'll have it separately.
But I like it. We'll have it separately.
Yeah. All right, man. I love you, and we'll talk next week then.
All right. Have it this week.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
If you like what you heard tonight, check us out on these social media platforms. Just search for My Journey Through the American Spirits. Also, check us out on our new website,